Good evening again. This is sort of a follow-up to the first recording I did regarding a question posed by Micah Scott concerning a generation that had the best kids, and then sort of the follow-up or prequel question regarding what does it mean to be a good kid. So I gave an answer in another video, and I thought, this is we're kind of on to something here, and a lot of other people chimed in as well. It was really kind of interesting to read the other responses to the questions. What the questions? What was the best generation of kids, and what does it mean to be a good kid? And how do you think about this? Like, you can think about this in a lot of different ways. I went through the kind of the demarcations of generations. How do you define the generations and the characteristics of each of those regarding how they kind of sat in cultures and technologies and the civility, productivity, etc. And there's probably a lot of other categories. But then I got to come back to the good kid. What makes the kid good? There's a lot of different ways you can evaluate a good kid. Right, but one distinguishing trait is the ability to think critically. And I started thinking about thinking critically. And, it sort of makes sense to me that in order to be a good kid, you probably have some degree of critical thinking. You've established the ability to do that. Thinking through things, not being told and not obeying certain things, but actually thinking through things. And so how does a kid develop critical thinking? Probably different ways, but surely the kid is probably taught how to think critically. I probably didn't realize that until I was in college, that I was being taught how to think critically, at least some of the time. But you're taught by your parents, you're taught by teachers, influencers, but you also have to have resources, just the capability, maybe the innate aptitude to think critically also. But think critically, and that sort of translates into this idea of an ongoing internal dialogue, right? And that's been talked about recently. I've seen some podcasts and such about that. If you're not talking to yourself, in other words, then maybe you're not thinking critically, and your decisions are not so orderly and good. So a kid needs to develop an ongoing internal dialogue, I suppose. And I read arguments that depending on the generation of kids, internal dialogue capabilities might be impacted by things like alone time and distraction time and instruction time, internet time, and so forth. There's probably a bunch of other things. And that those things have a determining factor on how well you can implement an inner dialogue. So anyway, that was my thought process, and I just started looking stuff up again, like I do. And what's an inner dialogue? It's a conversation we have. And so what does it do though? And so these are the things I found. There's 5 things here again. It's always like 5 or 6 things. But the inner dialogue plays a big role in shaping your critical thinking. According to this, it clarifies thoughts. So when you think through ideas, you slow them down and you make them more precise. It helps you notice gaps and contradictions. It also, number 2, encourages multiple perspectives. So an inner dialogue often works like a debate. One part of you argues for and another part pushes back. So I'm sure everybody does a little bit of that. The back and forth simulates what happens in real discussions and sharpens your reasoning. So it sort of prepares you for arguments or debates. Critical thinking or internal thought also strengthens problem solving. So by rehearsing certain scenarios mentally, in other words, if I do X, then Y might happen, you practice a structured thinking. And then this trial and error in your head helps avoid mistakes before acting. Right, so that seems logical. Number 4, it regulates emotions and bias. Inner speech lets you step back and narrate your own reaction. So I think you come out of yourself, so to speak, and look at it from another point of view. Here's a little quote here. If I feel defensive, but that's clouding my judgment, so it's kind of a thought to just step back. Let's see, so number 5, reinforces memory and learning. So talking to yourself internally while studying and reading or analyzing helps encode information. So it kind of puts it in there to stay. And the clearer the inner explanation, the deeper the understanding. So just to summarize, I guess, my thoughts and then what I'm looking into further. The inner dialogue kind of works as an internal tutor. So, and it sort of allows you to think on your own without outside influences, so to speak. And a lot of the arguments I read were, certain generations, especially the generations from a few decades ago, gave you more of the ability, maybe the more elbow room to do inner dialogue, more alone time, things like that. What's your thought?